you to our first speaker, Anton Flores. Many of you know him. He's the co-founder and the resident of Casa Alterna. Anton, what is going down there in Georgia?
Yes, hey, thanks, Sue, for allowing me to be a part of this gathering. And I look forward to also reconnecting with many of you and learning and being inspired from each of you, and just knowing that we are all connected to one universal family and one universal kingdom. So a little bit about us, and I'll start with just a story. Last night in our community that I'll describe in a bit, we hosted the mayor of our town, of about 30,000 people, and also the head of our county archives and other community leaders. Some of our neighbors from Guatemala and Mexico prepared a meal, and I gave those who visited us a tour of our community. I told them about how, at least from somewhere around the 1920s to the 1960s, this little enclave cul-de-sac that we live in was called Goose, Holler. It was a Black community in a time where African Americans were limited in the places where they could choose to live here in the South. It was a place where folks lived in substandard housing and with no running water and no electricity. So obviously this was at the heart of this whole time in the South, where folks lived separately and unequally. But in the center of our neighborhood, we were actually one of 3 African-American enclaves, and we were the center of the 3. And in the center of our community was a church. And the church, interestingly enough, its name was Welcome Church. Now, in 1952, Welcome Church was destroyed by fire. The white led newspaper in 1952 printed an article, a very brief article about the church fire, but just said that there was no known cause. In our speaking with an expert, a woman who lived here during that time, an 85-year-old Miss Maddie Body, she told us that the neighbors always knew that it was arson. So that was the history that we brought to these individuals. Now today, if you come to our neighborhood, we are a community of about 28 families, most of whom cannot access utilities in their own name, and who live very marginalized live a very marginalized life. Over 90% of the residents in our little community the adults originate from Guatemala, and all of them except for our family originate from somewhere in Latin America. But much like Goose, Holler back in an era of segregation, we are also a thriving, faithful, industrious, hardworking community. And we are filled with hope. And so I want to just talk a little bit about some of the ways in which in our 16 years of existence as Alterna, we have tried to be strategic and yet incarnational. And I think the ways in which we have tried to be strategic is by being incarnational. We talk about Casa Alterna as being a house of hospitality that is devoted to faithful acts of mercy and justice. And so in that statement, you've got 3 key words that I think have guided us well. And rather than me give you kind of a cookie cutter, just do this, I want to just kind of explore those things a bit with you. What does it mean to inspire as a faith community, as a congregation? What does it mean to inspire and invest in works of hospitality, as it relates to the opportunity to be with immigrants and seek justice? What does it mean to inspire and invest in works of mercy? And what does it mean to inspire and invest in lives and acts of justice? So for that, it's meant many different things. I mean, for us, this notion of hospitality has meant a literal displacement, a relocation for us, in that we now live and rent from the same landlord as our neighbors do, in solidarity. And I'll tell you, in this past year, I have learned so much about this notion of hospitality. I have learned so much more about what it means, especially in this current climate and under this current presidential administration. One of the things that I'm realizing right now is I have to also not just take a posture that says, doggone it, I'm going to do justice, but I have to hold in tension this concept of doing justice with doing no harm. And this is a very interesting tension that I am holding, because the very first month, and when we moved into this neighborhood, again, Alterna has existed for 16 years in this town, but we moved into this cul-de-sac just a year ago. Within the first month of living here, I was already awoken to the fact that we would have immigration agents, plainclothes immigration agents in unmarked vehicles waiting at the opening of our cul-de-sac. And as our elementary age children, of which, by the way, we have about 45 children under the age of 18 that live here, as the elementary age children are waiting to catch their bus, and their parents are going in hired vehicles to go to work, those vehicles were being pulled over by immigration officials and in plain sight of their children. And the drivers, though, tended to be folks like me, U.S. citizen, or somehow have some type of legal status, had access to a Georgia driver's license, but were being pulled over for less than clear explanations, such as we're conducting an investigation, or you didn't make a proper stop. And it was a very precarious and traumatizing experience for the entire neighborhood, as children then would not go to school, as parents would not go to work, as some parents were sadly detained as a result of that. And so for me then to be here as this U.S. citizen, what I wanted to do was rally the troops and just and file complaints and raise a whole bunch of ruckus. I'm not saying I didn't do some of that, but I have learned, though, that I have to follow the lead of my community and my neighbors and embrace my own impotence and embrace my own powerlessness. And I think that is something that I've learned in terms of my faith journey, is that this life of incarnational solidarity, not just theme or cause-driven advocacy, requires of us to displace ourselves, to embrace a level of impotency, but to also find the joy and the resiliency in the communities who aren't just dealing with a situational crisis. They are dealing with layers and layers and layers of sin, structural sin, and injustice. So again, I just go back to the question of, what does hospitality look like? What does it mean to welcome the stranger? What does it mean to displace ourselves so that when Charlotte and I moved into this neighborhood, we not only had the beauty of welcoming the stranger in the broader sense of our city's context, but we had the opportunity to be welcomed as the stranger, because now in this neighborhood, the culture is very Guatemalan, and we are the strangers. And so we were the ones who were being lavished with tamales as greetings. We are the ones who are learning what it's like to interact with adults who are working 50, 60 hours a week, who are tired. We are the ones that are, learning what it's like to have the children in our neighborhood see us as a part of their extended family, and how we adapt and how we embrace that welcome as well. As we look at what's going on in the United States today, and I just want to make sure that we don't just see this as some type of acute crisis. It is a chronic situation that has flared up in a very heinous way. But family separation has happened from the moment someone is forced to migrate. It happens the moment someone says goodbye to their sending community because of whatever the push factors might be, whether they be political persecution, whether they be economic repression, whether they be, our drug policies, whatever those reasons might be, family separation is always one of the casualties of unjust forced migration. So in that though, but in this particular moment, I mean, some of the things that we are seeing as needs are that while here in Georgia, we are having some of these families who had been separated and have been reunified. One of the situations that we have here and kind of one of the outpost communities is that these families come and maybe they're not detained any longer, and they're placed in what is called as an alternative to detention. But this alternative is very burdensome. Just today, one of our volunteers provided transportation to a gentleman who had to do his check-in. He's on an ankle monitor, and he has to check in sometimes once or twice a month, and has someone come visit him up to once a week in his home. So those are days that he is not able to work. If in our community, to get to Atlanta for those check-ins, he would have to miss a day's wages, plus pay $120 for someone to drive him round trip, plus deal with just the stress and the fear accompanied with every time he has to report to the ICE field office. So we are finding that transportation assistance for those individuals that are being reunified or have a pending asylum case going on, that transportation is a wonderful way to accompany someone and to be a part of alleviating the stress that complicates that because of the economics, because of the legal issues, and the fact that we do not provide due process. So most of the individuals do not have any legal counsel accompanying them. Beyond that, again, our model has been one of houses of hospitality, whether that's within a community, much like where we are now, or whether that's like El Refugio at Stewart Detention Center that we helped found in 2010. Our goal is to always inspire folks to take that call of hospitality pretty literally and incarnationally. And so we love the Catholic worker model of houses of hospitality, and really do see that in the sense that with that hospitality, that everyone who comes into our door, we see them as though they were Christ in the distressing disguise. In closing, I just want to come back to our neighborhood and talk about something that took place, another reason why the mayor and the head of our archives was here last night. And that is because this summer, with the children of our community, we held a 2-week freedom school. We called it Camp Libertad. Libertad is Spanish for both liberty and freedom. And it was in that camp that we discovered this history together about Goose, Holler, and about who it was that had lived on this land. We went all the way back to the creeks and the woodlands, but then we talked significantly about those who lived here when it was Goose, Holler. And it was the children of our community who went before the city council and the mayor. Probably the average age of the 3 children that spoke was about 12 years old. And they were the ones who gave an impassioned speech about why we needed to recover that history and recognize that history. And now they have been a part of developing the small lot of land where Welcome Church once sat. And we're collaborating with the city and with Welcome Baptist Church, which still exists in another location. And we will soon be unveiling a park that will simply be called Welcome Park. The tagline for Alterna is that we believe that love crosses borders. And so in those 3 words of love crossing borders, we try to encapsulate everything that I've talked about, from hospitality to mercy to justice and now to welcome. So I thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this, and I look forward now to learning from everyone else.